Hello everyone, I hope you have been doing well. And as I had already promised you that I will bring you the second part of my Oppenheimer's biography's review. I'm back here on the channel after almost 3 weeks. So I hope it is not much of a delay from my side, but I was busy traveling to some places. So to give you a quick recap about what had happened in the previous part, that how Oppenheimer was the person who was from a regular scientific enigma, like reached to the upper levels of Washington, and who had also become a political advisor, a sort of a political advisor in his time during his work in the Manhattan Project. So in today's video, I will talk about two things. The first thing that I will talk about is thought to be the associated communist ideology, and the second thing that I will talk about is his too much of lobbying that he decided to go through to stop the use of atomic bomb, or sort of put a cap on the use of the atomic bomb globally. So, picking it up from the years when Oppenheimer was associated with the Manhattan Project, the eminent scientist Niels Bohr, who was also a very good friend of Oppenheimer, had visited the lab, the project site, and looking at the entire scenario that was going back in those days in the political scenario, as well as the use of the eminent use of atomic bomb that US is going to use on Japan probably. So Niels Bohr was already having some reservations about use of this particular bomb, and he had already warned Oppenheimer that it might this the use of this bomb, if it is not sanctioned or if it is not regulated, it might prove as a threat to the civilization. While this seemed naive back in the time when Oppenheimer was associated with the Manhattan Project, but once uh, US actually blew those two bombs on Japan, right? On Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Oppenheimer had a very really deep impact on his perspective towards like how it really might end up the civilization, and how Niels Bohr was correct about warning him at the first place, right? So during those years, America did involve in several conferences. In one conference was happened in Potsdam with Russia, and even though Japan was putting those requesting those unconditional surrender, America was really hell bent to prove its monopoly over the atomic bomb, and they really blew it on Japan, right? And when Russia also decided that it wanted to ban the use of atomic bomb, America was single-handedly saying that that we are going to use it. They had actually provided something called the American proposal to the Russian government, and they had in that proposal they had told that we will have access of the uranium mines from Russia as well. We will design the atomic bombs, and we will also keep the sort of unregulated reserves of atomic bombs coming in the years of 40s or 50s or even 60s. And that did not obviously go well with Russia, and Russia was also involved a lot with like spying activities. So these sort of things did not go well with both the countries, and it actually blew off, right? America was not listening to anything that we actually should care about. How do we regulate these atomic bombs? And on top of that, there was this another scientist, Edward Teller, who was also part of Manhattan Project. He was hell bent on designing an a hydrogen bomb, right, which had a destructive power more than 100 times of a single atomic bomb, which was a very wrong idea to perceive with. And government was listening to that, right? Government was really thinking of designing a hydrogen bomb. And these two the unregulated use of atomic bombs, as well as uh, an idea of designing the hydrogen bomb, was not going well with Oppenheimer, who was already suffering a lot through those two bomb explosions that America conducted in Japan, right? So with the idea of putting a control on the use of atomic bomb, also to use it only for the civilian purpose and not for the military purpose, he had conducted a committee called General Advisory Committee with the Atomic Agency in America. And As the director of this particular advisory committee, he regularly submitted reports or ideas for how to use atomic bombs more in a more regulated and civilized way, and what sort of sanctions there are should be there, and what sort of international collaborations we can move forward with, so that we can use atomic bomb as well as we do not put a threat to the entire civilization on this planet, right? So one report which was quite famous, Exxon Lilienthal report, they did submit through General Advisory Committee, but all these reports that Oppenheimer submitted timely again and again, they went into the classified section. Like during the Harry Truman's time or even the Eisenhower's time, it was all these reports were classified, and there was not much thought put upon what sort of advices that were mentioned in those reports, that were, if they would have been used by the government back in the 60s or 50s, it would have proved better for the civilization as well as for Oppenheimer's life as well as his career. There were several like White House like administrators, senior people who had access to the president's office, porters as it called in America. So one of the name is George Kennan. All of these people think highly of Oppenheimer, and they really did support him through all of this lobbying process, but things really did not work out at the end of it. The second part that is widely covered in this book and even in the movie is the thought to be communist allegiance of Oppenheimer back in 30s, 40s. As mentioned in this book, his wife Kitty, her one of her previous husband was a communist, right? His own ex-girlfriend Jean Tetlock, whose character is also covered in the movie by Florence Pugh, she was also a communist, and like thought to like like committed suicide, right? And the third part, which is widely covered in this book, is something called Chevalier affair. One of his friend, Hakon Chevalier, he was a not a scientist but a professor of French literature at the University of Los Angeles, California, right? UCLA. So Chevalier was someone who had approached Oppenheimer during one of his dinner parties, and even Chevalier was like approached by this other person called George Altenton. So this guy had asked Chevalier to pick out information from the Manhattan Project from Oppenheimer, which was somehow classified, putting that sort of ideology under the government, that probably Oppenheimer was involved in passing on information from the Manhattan Project to the Russian uh, side of it, right? Like the Russian government. So during 1943, Leslie Groves had interviewed him. During 1946, Boris Pash had interviewed him, Oppenheimer. So both the times he had put out two separate stories, like the while not passing on the information to Chevalier, and while also like keeping a safeguard on his friend Oppenheimer, who was trying to save, like put a safeguard on Chevalier's identity towards this whole mess. All these three things, his wife's past with having a communist husband, his own ex-girlfriend as a communist, and Hakon Chevalier affair, had put a very problematic light on Oppenheimer's allegiance with communism. Although throughout his life, he kept on saying he was a free thinker, he was someone who is a passerby, or like someone who is not associated completely but who just shows sympathy towards the cause. He never identified himself as a communist, but government was hell-bent on putting his security under the question. So as I already told you that Oppenheimer openly put like resistance towards the use of hydrogen bomb. In one of his TV interview, he had openly put out this statement that a super bomb was a matter that touched the very basis of our morality. It is a grave danger for a fact that these decisions are taken on facts held secret. This putting a question on Oppenheimer's patriotism towards America, right? And to put on, uh, to add on to that, for 50s and 60s, or even the early 40s, America was suffering through the McCarthyism. It was a dark era in the history of political history of America, where left wing community or leftist people were openly like reprehended. They were politically reprehended. They were like persecuted from the country, and sometimes in a few cases they were even deported from the country. So this was a policy of one of the senator in America, so Joseph McCarthy, and that's why it is called McCarthyism. And it was a dark time in American history, political history. So any dissent, to basically, in short, put it in a way that any dissent against the government was equalized with disloyalty. So if you are not agreeing with the policies of the government or the actions of the government, you are a unpatriotic person who is thinking towards the failure of American civilization or the United States of America, right? And you are really not a part of the country. So sometimes, if the action against you is really grave, you will likely be deported from the country. And during these years, a House uh, Unactivities Committee was also created, HUA committee. So this committee was putting sanctions, or this committee was trying to catch people who had dissentful history through communism and all. So Frank Oppenheimer was persecuted by HUA. He had to leave his career in physics, and he then ended up opening a ranch in California. Some of Oppenheimer's students, like Lomenids or Joseph Weinberg, they all were also persecuted by HUAC, and some of them had to deport from the country altogether, taking minimum wage jobs or like professorships in countries like Brazil or India or France. So it was a very hard time for people who were putting dissentful actions or activities. And Oppenheimer was also considered through under the eye of HUAC, and under the eye of McCarthyism, right? So as it is widely covered in the last 1 hour or so in the movie of the recent movie from Nolan. So Oppenheimer was also under the eye of McCarthyist government, and in 1953, Eisenhower government had completely blackballed him from the access of White House. And in 1954, as it is covered in the last 100 pages of the book, or even in the final part of the movie from Nolan, it is covered widely. I will not go into the details much. Those security hearings, which were headed by Gordon Gray in Washington, that completely focused upon his Chevalier affair, as well as his thought to be communist allegiance during the 30s and 40s, or his open defiance of the use of hydrogen bomb, right? So all of these themes really put down the case of Oppenheimer in those 1954 security hearing, which lasted almost for 1.5 month. And at the end of it, he lost his security hearing. And I don't think anyone there in the history who, even after having such a successful career, giving such a big contribution to the scientific community and even the political community, to a country which is still a superpower. There has been no one whose life, whose personal life, whose history has been scrutinized this openly in public, the way Oppenheimer's life was scrutinized, right? So that loss really put down uh, him as a person. He had lost faith in life. He was going through a very tough phase after that particular security hearing, right? So as during his final years, he was also the director of Princeton physics department. So when he was based there, he was interacting with Einstein. So both these eminent scientists, although they were having differences in terms of their understanding of physics, they were both humanist. And Einstein really used to respect Oppenheimer, and vice versa. But because of that loss in security hearing, he could not take it well. He stopped going out in the public. He stopped having any political or scientific interactions publicly, giving any speeches publicly. So he was sort of a wounded animal, right? So post that security hearing, he took a cottage in these Virgin Islands off the coast of USA, and he spent his final few years there with his family and with his two kids. So uh, when he was in Princeton, so Princeton back in those days was famous for the courses in mathematics or physics, but there he also introduced courses like philosophy or like social sciences. Uh, but he was, while keeping the title of the director of the physics department, he was not active in any other such activity, right? So he he was sort of an absent person, and this lasted for a few years. But when 1962 arrived, that was the end of, like, post 1960, that was the end of McCarthyist days, McCarthyist era. And the new president, John F. Kennedy, really recognized Oppenheimer's contribution to the American cause, or like to the scientific community in general. So he had also invited him to one of his parties in White House. So Oppenheimer had, so in those last 10 years or so, he was having a very tough time, but Kennedy again gave him a break to be recognized as the person, the way the contribution he had given to the scientific community through the design of atomic bomb, right? But and there was talks of like international collaboration and regulation of the use of atomic bomb. So in a way, that was a win for Oppenheimer. But as I told you, the way his life was scrutinized openly, he could not take it well. And in 63, Lyndon Johnson, the president after Kennedy, had awarded a $50,000 Fermi Prize to Oppenheimer for his contribution to the scientific community. And unfortunately, I don't know why, but after such a big contribution, after such a big celebratory career, celebratory scientist career, Oppenheimer never could win a Nobel Prize. Like anyone in those days, while giving their good scientific community contribution, they were winning Nobel Prize, left, right, and center. Oppenheimer, even after having such a big discovery, such a crucial discovery in the times of World War, the discovery of atomic bomb, could not win a Nobel Prize. Uh, that feels a bit off, the way history turned out for Oppenheimer, but I don't know. Like, it's a very mixed sort of uh, thinking that I have while thinking about, yes, atomic bomb had put a, like, a disastrous, it really proved disastrous for Japanese community. But during the times of World War, uh, was that the complexities that were going across Europe, US, or like the Japan? So was the discovery of atomic bomb really appreciated for to be considered a Nobel Prize discovery, right? Or was it not? Or was it a failed discovery? Uh, I mean, all of us can think about it differently. Uh, but uh, the way, even after having or giving such a big discovery to the nation, he was scrutinized too much. His life was shattered because of the government scrutiny. And having those tough years in his final days during the 60s, he died in 1967 of lung cancer. He was a big time smoker, which is evident since the previous video. But as going through like a major depression, major crisis, he could not take that uh, the failure of the security hearing well. I mean, like, he was thinking, like, why was it even needed? I was giving my blood, sweat, and tears for this country, but the way this country is paying me back, he could not take it well. So he was going through a crisis phase, and he became like a irritable, thin, lanky person who was not well with interacting with people, smoking all the time. So eventually, in 1967, he had died of lung cancer, and Kitty, his wife, had died almost 5 years later, around 72 or 73. I'm not remembering correctly, but yes. So this is the life of the person, the father of atomic bomb, who has given the humanity atomic bomb, and the interpretation of that discovery is very subjective in nature. And I really recommend all of you to read this book. If you have watched the movie by Nolan, that's really good. You should watch it again or again. But if you want to know more about Oppenheimer's life, Julius Robert Oppenheimer's life, I really recommend you to go and read this book by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin. And soon in the next video, I will talk about one more book from the series of Civilizations Rise and Fall, as I've already given you the video of Jared Diamond's Guns, Jumps and Steel. So in my soon to be coming video after this video, I will talk about that book. I have completed that book also. The title is Collapse, which is the second book from the Jared Diamond series, Civilizations Rise and Fall. It is a very interesting book, so I'm sure you will love that video as well. So thank you and have a nice day. And I will try to give you that video very soon. I know it has been a lag in between recently, but I will try to avoid it. Thank you.